Seconds, let a few more people trickle in. All right. So it's 2 p.m. Let's get started. We'd like to welcome you all to our webinar, Preparing Course Content. My name is Jasmine Perrin. I'm a learning technology consultant at Teaching and Learning Services. I'm here today with a colleague who will be co-hosting the webinar with me, Megan Hirsch, who's also part of the education technology team at TLS. So we'd like to let you know that this session is being recorded. Please note that you are muted upon entry for the duration of the presentation. So we ask you to hold off with questions. We're going to be setting some time at the end of the webinar to address your questions. And some final housekeeping points: the slides for this presentation are shared on our site where the webinars are. So let's get started. We're going to start by going over the goals we have for this webinar. For today's webinar, we're going to demonstrate how to organize and manage course content in My Courses. We're going to explore how to curate and create materials, including videos, for your course, and we're going to identify strategies for students to practice your content. So I'm now going to give the floor to my colleague Megan, who is going to talk about organizing your content strategically and why this is important.
So thank you, Jasmine, and thank you everybody for attending today. As Jasmine mentioned, my name is Megan, and I'm co-hosting today's webinar. So before we jump in, I just want to acknowledge that many of you are already applying the strategies that we will be discussing today, because these are relevant to both in-person teaching and remote teaching. We are, however, discussing and emphasizing these strategies because they are particularly important in the context of remote teaching. So let's start by examining course examination. So organization, sorry. And course organization benefits both instructors and students. Planning and organizing your course content is building the bones of your house. You want to think about the outline of your course and create an overall structure that's both engaging and cohesive for you and your students. The structure of a course greatly impacts the student experience. A clear course structure motivates students, improves their persistence, raises their engagement, and grades. Students in effectively organized courses are able to spend their time focusing on learning because they know what they're supposed to do and when. And this planning is also key for you as an instructor. It allows you to determine what type of content you will include and in what order you'd like to share with your students. And this planning really saves time by avoiding curating or creating unnecessary materials. So try to apply these 3 organization strategies when organizing your course. The first is to set expectations. And what I mean by this is to define and communicate what the learning outcomes and expectations are for the overall course, as well as for each individual module. So the course outline template on the TLS website, which you'll be able to see in this next slide, is a great resource to refer to when thinking about the kind of information you want to share with your students. Think about communicating with them at the beginning of the course, but also throughout, like for example, at the beginning of each module. This will help students navigate through your content with a sense of control. They know what to expect, but also what is expected of them. And the second strategy is to use simple navigation. So imagine the total learning experience from the perspective of the online student and organize your course accordingly. Online students can become confused or frustrated if they find it challenging to simply navigate your course. When students use a lot of their cognitive resources just figuring out how to access your materials, they have few left for the content itself. So I'm just going to show you 3 examples of how this could look like in My Courses. And the first is that you can organize your content chronologically, so by week, so creating a module for each week. And the second example would be you can organize your content by topics, so grouping materials addressing the same theme or topic together. And the final example is that you can organize your course by type of content, so grouping similar types of content such as activities, readings, discussions, etc. together. So choose titles for your modules that will help your students understand the structure of your course. Is your course built around a central question, a series of themes, a theoretical framework? Use your navigation to communicate the structure of what you want your students to learn. So the third and final strategy is to stay consistent. While there are many different ways for you to organize your course, as we've just seen, once you've chosen your strategy, the best thing you can do for your students is to implement it as consistently as possible. Like in-person students who get in the habit of going to class at the same time and the same place every week, online students need to form those same habits to maintain consistent performance across the semester. So use consistent structure and naming conventions for content, assignment, and activity. So for example, if we go to the next slide, you'll see in this economy class has organized its module by week, and each module is consistently named using the week of the course and the topic addressed. And maybe think about making frequently used resources easy to find. If you have instructions for a major assignment or resources that students will be using throughout the course, you could keep those in a module on the main menu level rather than in a weekly folder where students kind of have to hunt around for them. So now that we've talked a bit about course organization, let's move on to the tools that you can use in My Courses to organize your course. So in My Courses, content is organized into modules and submodules, which act as folders and subfolders. And in these are topics, which are your course materials. So Word and PDF documents, links to files, websites, activities, assessments, etc. So for example, if you're organizing your course by week, as we've previously seen in one of our last examples, your first module could be week 1. And the submodules could be the various topics that you're addressing in this week, such as, for example, topic introductions. And inside your submodules would be the relevant course materials. So these really allow you to structure your course content. Another way that My Courses allows you to organize your course is through release conditions. So by predetermining when students have access to materials. These conditions can be set for any module, submodule, or topic. So for example, you could give students access to a certain assignment only after the relevant lectures have been given. Or you could give students a due date to a reading, letting them know how they should progress through your content. If students are working in groups on a presentation, release relevant information about their specific topic only to their group. And a final example of release conditions is that you could give access to the first module of your course only to students that have read the course syllabus. And you can really mix and match these to set a pace for your course. So I'm going to let my colleague Jasmine tell you more about curating and creating materials for your course. But before she jumps into that, I just want to address accessibility. Once you have an idea of how you'd like to organize your course, you can really start thinking about the content. But before you do that, it's important to consider accessibility right off the bat, just so that you don't have to switch out some of your content because some of your students are having trouble either interacting with it. So the first thing to think about is that My Courses is an accessible platform. This means that it can be navigated using assistive technologies, and there are no barriers that prevent access to or interaction with the platform itself. So what you as an instructor really need to be mindful of is the content that you put into My Courses. So if you're creating content in Microsoft, we recommend that you use the accessibility checker. Do a quick scan of your documents and correct any of the known accessibility issues that it flags. Whenever possible, provide captioning for your videos. And this can actually be done with the lecture recording system that automatically captions any content that's uploaded. Try to use multimedia that is accessible. So for example, videos that already have closed captioning, audio clips or podcasts with transcripts, that sort of thing. And during your course lectures, describe visuals. So instead of saying, look at this graph, verbally describe what the graph is communicating to ensure that even if a student has difficulty seeing the elements, they can still obtain the information that the graph conveys. And our final accessibility tip is to always provide options for virtual participation. So this ensures that if students experience any barriers with participation, they have alternatives that can still allow them to engage with their peers and interact with the course. So for example, if you're having your students discuss a specific topic in Zoom breakout rooms during your course, you can also create a discussion forum in My Courses about the same topic, allowing students that did not take part in the breakout rooms a chance to participate. And if you'd like to explore the topic of accessibility further, you can reach out to the accessibility advisor at the Office of the Provost, Rachel DeJordy. We have her contact information here in the PowerPoint, so you will have access to that after the webinar. So now I'm going to give the floor over to Jasmine, who's going to tell you a bit more about curating and creating content.
Thank you so much, Megan. So now that we've covered ways in which you can organize your content, we will discuss how you can go about adding content to your modules. So you have two choices. You can curate content, which means you can collect other people's work or resources that are already available, or you can create content. We're going to be covering both. So whether you curate or create content, it's important to keep a few design principles in mind when thinking about a remote learning environment or a remote teaching environment. The first principle is to be intentional. So being intentional can mean a few things. It's important to define your learning outcomes before you start adding course content. Following this, all content that you add should align with those learning outcomes. Each piece of content should also be relevant. So ask yourself, does this really need to be here? How does this add to student learning? How does it help them achieve the learning outcomes I've chosen? This also means that you should then be very clear with your expectations. If you create a reading list, do you want them to read everything that's on that list, or is some reading required while others might be additional? It's sometimes really easy, especially in an online environment, to upload really interesting but irrelevant content alongside your intended content. So just being clear, like what is relevant and what is more for their own interests. It might be helpful to set expectations for their time as well. I've taken a few online courses where the instructor indicated exactly how much time he or she expected us to spend on certain sections. So this was very helpful for my own time management as a student, and I knew what to focus on and what was most important. Being intentional also gives you the opportunity to highlight what's important. So explicitly letting them know that certain sections are more critical than others. Additionally, being intentional with the content you choose can also include giving rich examples to support your content. So students might have an easier time understanding concepts when they're supported by examples. The second principle is to make your content personal. So build rapport with them by including content that's addressed to them specifically. If it's in a video, don't be afraid to talk to them and just be yourselves. Because you're no longer in that room together, it might be difficult for them to feel connected with you in the content in the same way that they would face-to-face. So even little things like starting a video, saying hi everybody, I hope you're hanging in there, can really go a long way. Doing anything you can really to foster that type of rapport should always be a priority, given that the circumstances that we're in are so extraordinary. And the third design principle is keeping your content focused. So whether it be readings or videos, it's important to break your ideas down into smaller chunks so that you present one coherent idea at a time. If you choose to create and record videos, keeping your videos limited to about 5 to 10 minutes is the most ideal when keeping your students' attention focused. It's also a good idea to break your content down with interactive activities. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later in detail. And that might include very short knowledge checks or opportunities for discussion between content pieces. So as an instructor, you can validate the resources and decide how students are going to interact with content, much in the same way that you choose, that you review and select a textbook or readings or different activities with your students on campus. You can review and curate online resources for your students to interact with in your online environment. So we encourage instructors to curate content whenever they can. Don't reinvent the wheel. There is a wealth of great online resources that instructors can review to curate content for their students. The first place that you might want to look to curate materials is within our own library. So the library has a liaison librarian for each department who are subject-specific research experts that can help you find what you're looking for. We encourage you to use these resources. The MIGO community also has access to a variety of platforms through the library catalogs like Canopy and World Cat Discover that have books, videos, and different types of media that are available for you to use in your courses. So if you want more information on this, I highly encourage you to contact your liaison librarian. The next place that you can look are at Open Educational Resources, or OERs. OERs are freely available teaching and learning materials that are either in the public domain or are available under an open license. So this allows you to use them, reuse them, adapt, and share your materials. Your liaison librarian can also help you find openly licensed teaching materials like OERs. Some examples of well-known OER providers are Khan Academy, for example, which are educational videos, and OpenStax textbooks. In addition, there are many other free open resources you might consider using. So YouTube and TED Talks, for example, contain a wealth of educational videos that you might be interested in sharing with your students. So because curating involves sharing somebody else's work, we believe that it's important to mention copyright and intellectual property. The McGill Library does have certain copyright guidelines. Many instructors don't realize that McGill has a system in place called Savia that allows you to legitimately and fairly post scanned materials to my courses. This system allows instructors to use up to 35%, freely copy up to 35% of a book to share within my courses. So if you'd like more information on copyright at McGill, please visit the link that we've provided here. McGill also has a wealth of information on this topic. And additionally, if you have more specific questions for your own course, you can always contact a copyright librarian at copyright@mcgill.ca. We would also like to mention that your intellectual property rights do not change because you're teaching remotely. So I've had a few instructors voice concerns about their lectures being recorded or their slide decks being shared in public places. Please note that this is not allowed and your content is protected in a closed environment like my courses. So you might want to add, consider adding a statement about copyright of your course materials and posting it either as an announcement in my courses or perhaps on your course syllabus. We have some templates for these types of statements on our website, which we're going to share with you in the chat. If you're unable to curate the information that you want with your students, you can create it. So forms of content you might already be familiar with creating include PowerPoint presentations or PDF readings. You might also be familiar with creating activities for your students. Since you're going to be teaching in a remote setting, the type of content that tends to be more popular in that context is lecture recordings or videos. So because of this, I'd like to focus on best practices and strategies for creating videos in your course. Before diving into creating videos, we should suggest that you take some time to think a little bit about what you want to do before you actually do it. So first, you should determine your goals and what you want to achieve with your video. It's important to consider how your video is going to align with your course and learning outcomes. What topics do you want to cover? What kind of video do you want to make? How will your video enhance the learning experience of the students? You can even map out a plan for your video before you start. So for example, let's say you wanted to produce a short video of a demo of a chemistry experiment. So just creating the structure that identifies who your audience is it first year science students? What are their backgrounds? What experiment will you be doing? What is the purpose of the video and how will it help them achieve your learning outcomes? Do you want to consider making a short lab safety video beforehand or maybe like a bloopers video after with what could go wrong in an experiment? It's important to give your video this type of structure before you start recording it. So once you've established what you're going to be covering and who your video is going to be for, you can decide how you will go about creating the video. So what equipment are you going to need? Do you need a special camera or can you use your phone? Do you need special access to a lab or can you record the experiment at home perhaps? And what type of software and technologies will you need? So I'm going to be covering a few of the tools that are available to you in the next slide. And finally, what do you want to say exactly? So you don't need to write a script word for word, although it might be helpful, but you should have an idea of what you're going to say. So though it may seem like a lot of people's video content in educational videos on YouTube, for example, are improvised, most people have a very well-established script before they start recording. Before you start recording, you may also want to get feedback on your plan. So ask a colleague, maybe a family member, or anybody who has some time to review your plan. Depending on the type of video you're producing, it can be quite time consuming. So before you spend hours recording and editing a video, it's a good idea to just make sure that your plan makes sense beforehand. Does the flow of your ideas make sense? Does the video meet the goals that you originally set? And once you're happy with your plan, you can go ahead and record it. So before sharing, just make sure you review it one more time. You can get feedback again at this stage. Just make sure your audio is clear, make sure your pace is appropriate, and that your content and visuals, again, are all relevant. When you're happy with your final product, you can then share it with your students. So there are some options in what tools you can use to create a lecture recording or a video for your course. It really depends on what your needs or your plans are. So if you'd like to do a basic recording of your lecture, with or without students present, you can always do so using Zoom. So Zoom allows you to record live and interactive sessions with your students. You can also record your lecture ahead of time if your students aren't there. Zoom is likely the most straightforward and streamlined way that you can go about recording a lecture. So if you log in through the platform on my courses and record from there, when you're done, that recording is automatically saved within the lecture recording system in your course. The pros are that it's relatively streamlined and you can use features like the screen capturing feature or the whiteboard to interact with your material. The cons are that it's somewhat limited to recording what's going on in that moment and in that moment only. It doesn't have any opportunity for editing or adding any additional types of media. If you're looking to record short videos that just involve you presenting your PowerPoint slides, you might consider using the recorder in PowerPoint. So it's relatively simple. You record a voiceover of your presentation in presentation mode and then export your file like an MP4, or export your to a video file like an MP4. I've been told by multiple instructors that this is quite user-friendly. All you have to do is record your PowerPoint, if all you have to do is record your PowerPoint presentations, but keep in mind that it's quite limited. You can't record yourself, only your voice, and you're restricted to using the features that are in PowerPoint itself. Finally, you might be interested in producing more complex video productions that include different types of media, maybe images, different videos, annotations. You can include animations, screen captures. So Camtasia is the most sophisticated software of these three options I have here. It's a very powerful video editing program that is available to the McGill community. Adam is going to share a link to the IT software site, which will give you access to Camtasia and other available tools. You can potentially generate entire video modules using Camtasia, but I've met a few instructors that like to use it for just more finessed tutorial type videos scattered throughout their course. So for example, I had an instructor that wanted to produce a video to explain how to use the different formatting styles in Microsoft Word. So she said that she'd been explaining and re-explaining the appropriate use of the different formatting styles for years when students wrote essays. So she finally asked me to help her create a short tutorial video that she'd post or share with her students when necessary. And she wanted to use Camtasia. In the end, I actually didn't have to help her. She was able to figure out the software on her own. But once she did have that video produced, she said that it was a real time saver for her. So when students had questions or when she was seeing recurrent mistakes in using formatting styles and papers, she would just share the video with her students. The arrow here indicates the amount of time and the level of complexity involved in creating videos for each of these tools. Keep in mind that Camtasia videos can be quite time consuming, and And so just be aware of the time that you have to dedicate to other parts of your course, like your assessments, for example. If you do have extra time, perhaps Camtasia is right for you, but just know that the expectation is not for you to have perfectly edited video productions. In addition to that, Camtasia can be quite intimidating to some. But if you did really want to try it out, you can start small and record a low stakes video, like an introductory video of yourself or of your course, just to become a little more familiar with the video making in general. And if you do want to explore a little bit more about Camtasia, just to get a better sense of how the platform works and how it looks, we're going to be providing some really helpful resources that are actually provided by Camtasia itself, that include a variety of short video tutorials that you can watch. I also want you to keep in mind that you don't have to choose one type of video over another. You can choose a variety of videos in your course. So you might choose to record your fixed lectures and then record some additional video tutorials or other short types of videos to include in your content. Regardless of what you use to produce your videos, the best way to share them with your students is through the lecture recording system in My Courses. As I said, if you record through Zoom within your course in My Courses, your recordings are automatically uploaded to the lecture recording system. Captions are automatically added to your video as well. If you choose to record elsewhere like PowerPoint or Camtasia and you produce a video file, you can then upload your video file to the lecture recording system manually. At this moment in time, I realize that videos have to be viewed in the lecture recording system, but in the very near future, there's going to be an integration with the content, which will allow you to host the videos in the content section of My Courses so that students don't have to move back and forth between content and the lecture recording tab. There are different strategies in which you can get your students to interact and engage more deeply with your content. So I have an example here of an online course at McGill that uses a strategy of adding very quick and low stakes learning activities to the flow of the content. So as you can see in this module, there are videos that are about 5 to 10 minutes each, staggered with self-assessment questions. It's not the expectation that your course must look like this, so don't feel the need that you have to go into a full production mode and produce entire modules with videos, but it gives you an idea of how you can break your content pieces up and have them reinforced by short activities. So just to reiterate, rather than presenting long pieces of content and then giving your students knowledge checks or opportunities for practice at the end of a module only, you might want to consider staggering or alternating your content with activities. So when I say content, I really mean your course materials. So content doesn't have to be videos, as you saw in the example. It can be PowerPoint slides, it can be readings, it can be articles, websites, etc. The activities can also look a few ways as well. The activities are interactive pieces that allow students to practice understanding the content. So they can be self-assessment questions, they can be a quiz question, a survey question, or perhaps a discussion prompt. So having short activities like these give students an opportunity to check in with their learning, but they also shift their focus from listening or reading passively to being a little more active with their learning. You can use these types of activities as knowledge checks after you present a piece of content or as a way to get them thinking about the next content topic.
So in conclusion, to prepare your course content, start by determining how you want to organize your content. Create the bones of your course. Think about how the structure will impact your students' learning experience and what could be the most engaging and effective way of exposing them to your content. Make sure that your organization is explicit, easy to navigate, and that your students know how to get in touch with you should they need help finding information. The next step would be to really curate materials for your course. So try to curate existing materials rather than creating new ones if possible. There is a huge and rich selection of pedagogical materials that are readily available online, and the McGill Library has many online resources as well as a full staff of librarians that can help you find what you need. Once you've determined the existing content you'll be using, create additional content that you were unable to find elsewhere, such as PowerPoints, videos, readings, activities, assignments, etc. And finally, think about including low-stakes activities within your course. You've created or curated high-quality content, but it's also important to give your students the time to think about what they've heard, seen, or read. And this preparation will allow you to create a rich and engaging learning experience for your students. So we've given you a lot of information here today, and a good next step would probably be to start exploring My Courses and gain familiarity with the functionalities that we talked about today. So if you're new to My Courses, you'll find the My Courses Essentials to be a very helpful tool to get you started. It's a self-paced tutorial that includes descriptions of the most commonly used tools, as well as step-by-step instructions and video tutorials. So you can navigate through it as a full course, or you can refer to it when you're setting up your course. And I would also like to remind you that this webinar is part of a series, so you can still register to the others on our website. This session was recorded, so it will be published online with a series of links to tools and resources relevant to today's session. So now I think we'd like to hear from you. So if you could let us know in the chat if you have any additional questions. Jasmine and I will try to answer all of them. We do have about 10 to 15 minutes dedicated to this. So let me look. Adam's been answering questions as we go, so I'm hoping a lot of you have had your questions answered.
I had a question that came to me privately about copyright and intellectual property issues for a highly specialized course. The question was from Paul. So he was wondering if content can be posted in a way such that it expires like some EPUBs or movie downloads do. You can always ensure that content is no longer available after the end of your course, so students don't have access to it indefinitely. But I would suggest speaking to your liaison librarian or emailing copyright@mcgill.ca. They'd probably be able to give you a much more detailed and concrete answer that I can, other than expiring your course content after your course ends.
And Caroline, to answer your question, the My Courses Essentials will be on the My Courses platform. When you log into My Courses and you look at all the courses that you have access to, it should be in the list. All instructors have been enrolled, I believe. So if you're not seeing it appear, email IT support. They'll be able to enroll you.
Do we have any other questions? I don't know what the practice of McGill is, but I prefer not saving my lectures, but rather having only online lectures. What is the policy of McGill and TLS? You don't have to record your lectures. Adam, I don't know if you can speak to this in a little more detail. We don't have a policy that it is required that you record them and save them. You can have the online lectures. One of the things is that you have to keep in mind that you might not have students that are going to be all within the same time zone. So being mindful of where your students are around the world, if you're hosting an online live lecture at a certain time, is it going to be at midnight, you know, for some students? So keeping that in mind is important if you're not planning on recording at all.
And even from an accessibility standpoint, doing only live can be kind of problematic. Providing live captioning would be incredibly challenging, And when you put it into the lecture recording system, captioning would be provided automatically. So like Adam says in the chat, we definitely recommend that you make it available in my courses.
If a Zoom video is in my courses, can it be downloaded or just viewed online in my course? I believe it can be either. You can either turn on or turn off the functionality of having students be able to download it. Otherwise, if you have it turned off and they can't download it, they would just view it within your course. Any more questions about recording videos, perhaps? Just a note, I had somebody ask a question last week about self-assessment. So when I was talking about alternating your content with self-assessment activities, some people don't realize that self-assessments are a tool that are within my courses that allow you to create questions that the responses are not recorded, and there's no real recording of a right or wrong answer. So it gives students an opportunity to answer the questions just for their own practice. So they're very similar. They look the same as a quiz question, but their responses don't get recorded. So they're just for practice purposes only. Yes, Adam said, there's also a great tool called Video Assignment that allows you to make interactive type videos. So you can even stop a video within the video assignment tool and then have a question pop up and have students interact with it. We've provided some links here. Adam has provided one in the chat, but we're also going to have some resources on the video assignment tool on our website where the webinars are recorded. Tamara is asking, is the captioning for the video assignments? Oh, there you go. He's answering. Does anybody else have any other questions? We have about 7 minutes left. If nobody does, we'll be sticking around until 2:45, so you can stick around if you do have a question come up. If not, thank you so much for attending the webinar. This is our first one we've done in the afternoon, so it's a little bit of a change of pace, but thanks so much for attending.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Questions if you've already asked them.